Reaction is the transfer of power. Most people believe reacting quickly is strength. They believe speaking up immediately means confidence. They believe emotional response is proof of authenticity. But this belief is one of the most costly psychological illusions you can carry. The truth is harsher and far less comforting. The moment you react, you hand control to whatever moved you. Reaction is not power. Reaction is surrender. When something outside you dictates your internal state, authority has already shifted. It does not matter whether the reaction is anger, defense, justification, excitement, or hurt. The common thread is the same. Something external reached inside you and pressed a button. And the moment that button worked, leverage changed hands. This is why power never lives in the loudest response. It lives in the stillness that comes before any response at all. Most people mistake reacting for standing up for yourself. They think that if they don't respond immediately, they are being weak, passive, or disrespected. Society rewards this belief. Fast replies are praised. Emotional honesty is encouraged. Expressiveness is framed as courage. But respect does not follow expressiveness. Respect follows control. Standing up for yourself does not require emotional movement. It requires internal stability. When you react instantly, you are not asserting boundaries. You are advertising access. You are showing others exactly where you can be moved, rushed, provoked, or steered. And once someone sees that, they don't need to overpower you. They only need to repeat the trigger. Every reaction reveals information. Your tone reveals insecurity or certainty. Your speed reveals urgency or composure. Your emotion reveals attachment. This information becomes a map, and maps are tools for navigation and control. This is why experienced manipulators never begin with force. They begin with reaction tests. They make a comment slightly sharper than necessary. They introduce urgency. They apply guilt. They exaggerate stakes. They observe what moves you. They are not interested in what you say. They are interested in how quickly and how emotionally you say it. The biological truth behind this is simple and brutal. Reaction is not a conscious choice. Reaction is a nervous system event. When something triggers you, your body responds before your mind finishes interpreting the situation. Heart rate changes, breathing shifts, muscle tension increases. The body prepares for defense or submission. In that moment, higher reasoning is reduced. You are no longer choosing. You are responding. This is why reaction feels urgent and justified. It feels necessary because your nervous system is already acting. But necessity does not equal wisdom, and urgency does not equal authority. The person who does not react immediately is not slower. They are operating from a different level of control. They are allowing the nervous system to settle before the mind engages. This pause is invisible to most people, but it is felt. Silence after provocation creates tension. Calm after pressure creates imbalance. Stillness after an emotional push forces the other person to confront their own movement. And this is where power begins to shift. Manipulators understand this instinctively. That is why their first objective is never agreement. It is reaction. Once they get a reaction, they gain rhythm. Once they gain rhythm, they gain influence. A reactive person becomes predictable. A predictable person becomes steerable. This is also why manipulators avoid emotionally self-contained individuals, not because they are stronger physically or louder socially, but because there is nothing to grab onto. No urgency, no emotional leakage, no visible hooks. The absence of reaction creates uncertainty, and uncertainty makes manipulation risky. Power does not announce itself with force. It announces itself through non-movement. When you stop reacting, something subtle but profound happens. Conversations slow down. People choose their words more carefully. Provocations lose momentum. Attempts to rush you dissolve into silence. Others begin to regulate themselves around you, because you are no longer regulating yourself for them. This is not emotional coldness. It is emotional sovereignty. Being emotionally available means your inner state is open to external control. Being emotionally self-contained means your inner state is governed internally. One invites influence. The other commands respect. This is the identity shift most people never make. They move through life emotionally open, emotionally expressive, emotionally accessible, and then wonder why they feel drained, disrespected, or manipulated. The shift is not toward suppression, it is toward containment. Containment means you feel fully, but you decide when and how expression occurs. You do not give reactions away as reflexes. You use responses as tools. Before we go deeper into why reaction hands power away, tap like and hit subscribe. Because what comes next reveals the moment control shifts, not through force, but through the first emotional movement. From this moment forward, understand the law clearly. Power moves to whoever remains internally still, while others move emotionally. This does not mean you never speak. It means you do not speak from reaction. It does not mean you never feel. It means feeling does not command your behavior. It does not mean you are passive. It means you are anchored. The moment you stop reacting, the dynamic changes. Pressure moves outward, control returns inward, and the balance of power quietly, unmistakably, shifts. Why reactivity makes you predictable? The moment you react the same way twice, you stop being an individual and start becoming a pattern. And patterns are not respected, they are exploited. Human beings are not controlled through force. They are controlled through prediction. When someone can anticipate how you will respond emotionally, they no longer need to overpower you. They simply need to press the correct button and wait. Reactivity is not just an emotional flaw. It is a behavioral blueprint you hand to others. Every visible reaction teaches people how to treat you. If you get defensive when questioned, people learn to challenge you to destabilize you. If you explain yourself when pressured, people learn to apply pressure to gain leverage. If you become emotional when criticized, people learn where to strike. Over time, these reactions form a reliable map. And once a map exists, control becomes efficient. This is why predictability is the currency of manipulation. Manipulators are not interested in your values, intentions, or depth. They are interested in your consistency under stress. They observe how quickly you react, what tone you adopt, how much emotion leaks into your words, and how long it takes you to regain composure. These observations are stored, compared, and reused. You are not being understood. You are being calibrated. Most people think manipulation happens through clever words. In reality, it happens through emotional shortcuts. Triggers replace dialogue. Urgency replaces logic. Guilt replaces persuasion. When someone knows what makes you react, they don't need to convince you. They only need to activate you. This is why emotional triggers are so powerful. They bypass thinking entirely. A trigger does not ask permission. It creates movement automatically. And automatic movement is the opposite of power. Consider how quickly people reveal themselves when triggered. Tone changes. Speed increases. Justifications appear. Explanations spill out. Boundaries weaken. None of this is planned. It is reflexive. And reflexive behavior is easy to train. People learn how to treat you by watching what you tolerate, what you defend, and what you react to, not by what you claim, not by what you demand. Behavior teaches faster than words ever could. If someone sees that you react strongly to disrespect, they may stop disrespecting you, or they may use it strategically. Either way, they now know where your attention goes and how to move it. This is why some people appear to be constantly tested. It is not bad luck. It is feedback. Testing happens where reactions are visible. Pressure appears where leverage is possible. There is a critical distinction most people never learn. Feeling emotion is inevitable. Displaying it is optional. Strong individuals feel deeply, but they do not leak those feelings on demand. They do not allow emotion to dictate timing, tone, or posture. They separate internal experience from external behavior. This separation is not suppression. It is mastery. When you display emotion immediately, you collapse this separation. Your inner state becomes public property. Others don't need to guess what you feel. They can see it, and what can be seen can be influenced. This is why calm individuals feel hard to read. It is not because they lack emotion. It is because emotion is not being used as communication currency. Their reactions do not advertise their internal state. As a result, people around them must slow down, reassess, and self-regulate. Reactivity removes that requirement. It does the regulating for them. The most dangerous thing about reactivity is not that it looks weak. It is that it feels justified. Every reaction feels reasonable in the moment. But power is not built on justification. It is built on restraint. And restraint requires tolerance for internal discomfort without external discharge. This is the moment where most people fail. They cannot tolerate the silence after provocation. They cannot tolerate the pause after pressure. They cannot tolerate being misunderstood temporarily. So they react, and in doing so, they teach others exactly how to move them next time. The pause is where power lives. The pause interrupts pattern formation. The pause prevents predictability. The pause restores choice. When you reclaim the pause, you reclaim authorship over your behavior. You stop being an emotional reflex and start becoming a deliberate presence. People around you feel this shift immediately. Interactions slow. Tests reduce. Manipulative tactics lose efficiency. Not because you confronted anyone, but because predictability disappeared. This is the affirmation to lock in now. You do not owe the world immediate reactions. You do not owe pressure a response. You do not owe provocation emotion. You are allowed to pause. You are allowed to feel without displaying. You are allowed to choose timing over impulse. And as this becomes your default, understand the law clearly. Predictability is permission to be controlled. Remove predictability, and control collapses. The psychological pressure of non-reaction. Non-reaction is not a weakness. It is pressure, applied silently. Aggressive and manipulative people are not driven by strength. They are driven by movement. They need emotional motion to orient themselves. They escalate to provoke, accuse to destabilize, rush to compress your decision-making. When you react, you give them traction. When you don't, their entire strategy loses balance. This is why non-reaction feels threatening to unstable people. It removes the feedback they rely on. Manipulators are trained observers. They watch micro-expressions, tone shifts, pacing changes. They are constantly scanning for signs of influence. When none appear, uncertainty sets in. And uncertainty is intolerable for those who depend on control. Silence forces them to confront their own emotional state instead of managing yours. This is the first reversal of dominance. When you do not react, the emotional burden transfers outward. The tension they attempted to place inside you rebounds back to them. Their urgency becomes visible. Their impatience surfaces. Their intent leaks. Silence does not block pressure. It redirects it. Most people do not realize how uncomfortable unresolved social space is for the human nervous system. Silence interrupts expected patterns. It creates a gap the mind rushes to fill. In that gap, people explain, justify, overshare, escalate, or retreat. They regulate themselves out loud because you are no longer doing it for them. This is why silence is more effective than confrontation. Confrontation creates resistance. Silence creates exposure. When someone cannot provoke you, they must choose between escalation and self-restraint. Either choice reveals something important. Escalation exposes insecurity. Self-restraint exposes awareness. In both cases, you gain information without spending energy. Non-reaction does not mean inaction. It means delayed action with full awareness. This distinction is critical because many people confuse non-reaction with avoidance. Avoidance is fear-based withdrawal. Non-reaction is presence without participation. You are still there. You are still listening. You are still observing. You are simply refusing to be emotionally moved on command. Avoidance runs away from pressure. Non-reaction absorbs pressure without breaking. This is why emotionally disciplined individuals feel heavy in conversation. Their presence slows interactions. People become more careful with words. Interruptions decrease. Aggression softens or spikes. Both are data. Silence forces others to self-regulate because they no longer have an external target for their emotion. There is nothing to push against, nothing to hook into, no reaction to feed on. And without feedback, emotional strategies collapse. This is also why time becomes an ally when you stop reacting. Urgency is one of the most common manipulation tools. Deadlines, emotional ultimatums, forced choices, all are designed to compress time so reaction replaces judgment. Silence expands time again. It dissolves artificial pressure. What feels immediate loses intensity when you refuse to match its speed. Time exposes truth. False urgency cannot survive patience. Manufactured crises collapse when they are not emotionally fueled. People either calm down or reveal their agenda. Both outcomes favor the non-reactive individual. As you practice this restraint, a subtle identity shift occurs. You stop experiencing interactions as battles to win or lose. You stop needing to correct, defend, or prove. You begin watching dynamics unfold instead of being pulled into them. You move from participant to observer, not detached, but centered. This shift changes how you feel inside your own body. Breathing slows. Speech becomes measured. Responses become intentional instead of reflexive. You are no longer chasing equilibrium. You are holding it. Others feel this immediately. The calm observer becomes the emotional reference point in the room, not because they dominate, but because they are not dominated. Emotional energy orientates towards stillness. Chaos seeks structure. Reactivity looks for containment. This is the law that governs every high-stakes interaction. The least reactive person controls the emotional frame. They decide the pace. They decide the timing. They decide when or if engagement happens. This control is invisible, which is why it is so powerful. There is no argument to resist, no aggression to fight, no authority to challenge, only presence that cannot be rushed or moved. If this is changing how you see triggers, leverage, and self-command, tap like and hit subscribe. Your support matters because it helps this message reach people who are ready to stop being moved and start becoming the unmovable center. What changes the moment you stop reacting? The shift is subtle at first, then it becomes undeniable. When you stop reacting, the first thing that changes is tone. People speak to you more carefully, not because you demanded respect, but because uncertainty entered the interaction. Your lack of emotional movement forces others to slow down and recalibrate. They begin choosing words instead of throwing them away. Volume drops, pace changes. The conversation reorganizes itself around your stillness. Interruptions are the next thing to disappear. People interrupt those they feel they can rush, override, or emotionally outpace. When your reactions vanish, interruptions lose their function. There is nothing to interrupt into. Silence creates a boundary that can't be crossed impulsively. Others wait. They hesitate. They check themselves before pushing forward. Disrespect fades in the same way. Disrespect requires feedback. It feeds on reaction, irritation, defensiveness, explanation, emotional correction. When that feedback never arrives, disrespect feels pointless. It has nowhere to land. Over time, people either adjust their behavior or remove themselves. Both outcomes are wins. This is why emotionally unmoved individuals create caution without intimidation. Caution does not come from fear. It comes from uncertainty combined with composure. When someone cannot read you, cannot rush you, cannot provoke you, they treat you as a variable they must respect. Uncertainty plus calm signals authority, not dominance, authority. Manipulators sense this immediately. Their tactics depend on speed, guilt, urgency, flattery, and pressure. These tools require emotional access. When you stop reacting, access disappears. The manipulator is left with three choices. They retreat because the cost is too high. They respect because leverage no longer exists. Or they escalate and expose themselves. In each case, you gain clarity without confrontation. This is one of the least discussed benefits of non-reaction, exposure. When emotional tactics fail, intent becomes visible. People show you who they are when their usual tools stop working. Calm presence acts like a mirror. It reflects behavior back to the source without distortion. And this is where hierarchy quietly forms. Hierarchy is not established by force. It is established by who adjusts to whom. When others change their tone, pace, and strategy around you, hierarchy has already shifted. You did not announce authority. You embodied it. Calm presence creates hierarchy without aggression because it removes competition entirely. There is nothing to win against, nothing to push, nothing to dominate, only stability that others must orient around. This is why non-reaction is not silence for silence's sake. Non-reaction is an emotional boundary. It says, I will not be moved on your timeline. It says, I will not regulate your emotions for you. It says, I choose when engagement happens. You are still present. You still hear everything. You simply refuse to be emotionally conscripted. This boundary is felt immediately in the body language of others. They lean back instead of forward. They pause before speaking. They measure instead of impulse. Their nervous system responds to yours. Emotional systems synchronize. The calmest system becomes the reference point. As restraint integrates into your behavior, authority stops being something you perform and becomes something you radiate. You no longer need to explain boundaries. They are sensed. You no longer need to defend your position. It holds itself. This is why strong presence is quiet, not withdrawn, not passive. Quiet in the sense of being settled. The moment you stop reacting, you stop negotiating your internal state with the outside world. You stop offering emotional data for others to use. And without that data, behavior around you changes automatically. This is the integration phase. You don't try to be calm. You don't force restraint. You don't perform detachment. You simply stop leaking emotion on demand. From this point forward, your stillness does the work. It filters who stays, how they behave, and what they reveal. You become someone people adjust to, not someone who adjusts. Lock this law in now. Emotional stillness forces others to adjust their behavior, not because you dominate, not because you threaten, not because you explain, but because you no longer move when they expect you to. And in that unmoving center, power settles, quietly, permanently, and without resistance. Identity. Becoming the unmovable center. At a certain point, restraint stops being something you practice and becomes something you embody. This is where the real shift happens. Not at the level of behavior, but at the level of identity. A reactive person experiences life as something that happens to them. Words trigger them. Tone moves them. Pressure rushes them. Emotion pulls them forward before thought ever arrives. A responsive person lives differently. They experience life as something they observe first, then decide how or whether to engage. This difference is invisible, but it is absolute. Reaction is automatic. Response is sovereign. When this identity takes root, your relationship with emotion fundamentally changes. You still feel deeply, sometimes more deeply than before. But those emotions no longer demand immediate expression. They no longer leak outward to regulate discomfort. They stay inside long enough to be understood, sorted, and placed in context. You stop asking, "What should I say right now?" and start asking, "What happens if I say nothing?" That single question rewires power. Earlier, you learned the first law. Reaction is the transfer of power. Every time you reacted instantly, you handed control to the situation, the person, or the pressure. The second law followed naturally. Predictability is permission to be controlled. Once others could map your emotional patterns, influence became effortless. The third law completed the reversal. The least reactive person controls the emotional frame. Silence and restraint moved tension outward instead of inward. The fourth law made the transformation visible. Emotional stillness forces others to adjust their behavior. These were never tactics. They were structural truths about human behavior. And when those truths merge into identity, something irreversible happens. You stop trying to manage situations emotionally. You stop trying to be understood immediately. You stop trying to control outcomes through explanation or intensity. You become the unmovable center. Unreactive people move differently. Their body language is slower, grounded, economical. They do not rush because nothing inside them is chasing relief. Their posture communicates settlement rather than vigilance. They are not bracing for impact. They are already stable. Even in tense environments, their nervous system does not spike. Others feel this before a word is spoken. They pause without apology. This pause is often misunderstood by reactive minds. To them, a pause feels like hesitation or weakness. In reality, the pause is evidence of internal order. It signals that you are not being pushed, that you are not scrambling for footing, that you are deciding, not defending. Pauses slow conversations. They disrupt pressure. They reset hierarchy without confrontation. They speak less, but with weight. Unreactive individuals do not fill silence to ease discomfort. They allow silence to exist. When they speak, words are measured, deliberate, and free of emotional leakage. There is no urgency hiding in tone, no justification woven into language. Speech becomes a tool instead of a reflex. People listen, not because you speak loudly, but because when you speak, it matters. They decide slowly and execute cleanly. Because they are not emotionally hijacked, Decisions are not rushed. They wait for clarity rather than forcing resolution. They allow information to surface. They let others reveal themselves. And when they act, there is no need for explanation because the action stands on its own. Execution replaces persuasion. This is reactionlessness as default dominance. Not dominance through intimidation, not dominance through volume, not dominance through control, dominance through self-command. Power at this level does not argue because it does not seek validation. It does not explain because it does not fear misunderstanding. It does not escalate because escalation is a symptom of lost control. The absence of these behaviors is not emptiness. It is fullness. There is nothing missing that needs to be filled with noise. There is nothing to prove. People around you feel this absence immediately. Conversations change. Conflict loses energy. Manipulative tactics weaken. Some people become uncomfortable because they can no longer steer you emotionally. Others become respectful because they sense stability. A few expose themselves by escalating when their usual leverage fails. You do not need to confront. You do not need to call anything out. Your presence does the sorting for you. This is what it means to become the unmovable center. You are no longer pulled into emotional orbit. Others adjust their trajectory around you. Pressure no longer pushes you forward. Time no longer rushes you. Urgency no longer commands you. You remain where you are, attentive, grounded, deliberate. From this center, power emerges naturally. Not the power to dominate others, but the power to remain sovereign regardless of what others attempt. This is the highest form of control because it requires no effort to maintain. It is not activated. It is assumed. If this protocol showed you that reaction is surrender, tap like and hit subscribe. And comment this below. I choose stillness over reaction. Because when emotional movement stops, pressure loses direction and power returns to you.